Marcus Kane had been floating in a medical pod for 7 months, 14 days, and 16 hours. He knew this because the neural interface still functioned, even though everything else about his body had failed him. The doctors called it temporal nerve cascade syndrome, a condition so rare that he was only the third recorded case in human history. His nervous system had essentially locked him inside his own body, leaving him conscious but unable to move, speak, or even blink. The sterile white walls of the research facility had become his entire universe. Through the transparent aluminum viewport of his life support pod, he watched the endless rotation of medical staff, researchers, and the occasional family member who still bothered to visit. His wife, Sarah, had stopped coming after the 4th month. He didn't blame her. What was the point of sitting beside someone who couldn't acknowledge your presence? Dr. Elena Vasquez was different, though. She talked to him as if he could respond, updating him on the outside world, sharing stories about her daughter's soccer games, complaining about the coffee in the facility cafeteria. Marcus had grown to appreciate these one-sided conversations more than he cared to admit. They were the only thing that made him feel human anymore. The research facility, designated as Terra Station 7, orbited Jupiter's moon Europa. It was humanity's premier xenobiology research center, established after the discovery of microbial life beneath Europa's ice sheet 15 years ago. The station housed over 3,000 researchers, support staff, and their families. For Marcus, it might as well have been a tomb. He had been a communications specialist before the syndrome struck. His job involved monitoring deep space transmissions and analyzing patterns in cosmic background radiation. It was meticulous work that required patience and attention to detail, qualities that served him well now that patience was literally all he had left. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man whose job was to listen for signals from the cosmos now couldn't even signal his own need for water. The feeding tubes and waste management systems kept his body alive, but Marcus often wondered if this could truly be called living. He was a prisoner in his own flesh, aware of every sensation, but powerless to respond to any of it. During the long hours when no one visited, Marcus had developed his own mental exercises. He would replay conversations from his past, recite poetry he'd memorized in school, or construct elaborate fantasy scenarios where he could walk and talk again. Sometimes he imagined what he would say to Sarah if he could speak. Would he tell her to move on? Would he beg her to stay? The uncertainty gnawed at him more than the physical paralysis. Dr. Vasquez entered his room at precisely 1400 hours, as she had every day for the past 2 months. She carried her usual tablet and wore the same concerned expression that had become as familiar to Marcus as his own reflection once was. "Good afternoon, Marcus," she said, settling into the chair beside his pod. "The station's been buzzing with excitement today. We received some unusual transmissions from the outer system. Nothing conclusive yet, but the pattern analysis team thinks there might be something artificial about the signals." Marcus felt a flicker of his old professional interest. Pattern analysis had been his specialty. He wished he could ask about the frequency ranges, the modulation patterns, the source coordinates. Instead, he could only listen as Dr. Vasquez continued. "Your old department is working overtime trying to decode whatever they've picked up. Director Chun mentioned that they could really use your expertise right about now." She paused, studying Marcus's face for any sign of response. "I keep hoping that one day you'll surprise us all and just wake up from this. The neurological scans show normal brain activity. Marcus, you're all there, locked away. If only we could find the key. The key. If only it were that simple." Marcus had spent countless hours trying to will his body back into motion, focusing all his mental energy on moving just one finger, blinking one eye, anything to prove he was still present in his own skin. The effort was exhausting and futile, but he continued trying anyway. What else was there to do? Dr. Vasquez updated him on the station's daily operations, the progress of various research projects, and news from Earth. The war between the African Federation and the European Alliance had finally ended, she reported. Climate restoration projects in the Pacific were showing promising results. His nephew had graduated from engineering school and was applying to join the Outer System colonization program. Life continued everywhere except within the confines of his own body. As evening approached, and the station's artificial day cycle dimmed the lights in his room, Marcus prepared himself for another long night of consciousness without dreams. Sleep had become elusive since the syndrome's onset. His mind remained alert even when his body craved rest, creating an endless cycle of awareness that felt more like torture than existence. The station's corridors grew quiet as the research teams concluded their shifts. Through his enhanced hearing, a side effect of his condition that amplified certain senses while deadening others, Marcus could detect the subtle sounds that indicated the facility was settling into its night routine. Ventilation systems cycling, distant conversations in the corridors, the occasional footstep of security personnel making their rounds. It was during these quiet hours that Marcus felt most alone. Dr. Vasquez had gone home to her family. The medical staff had switched to skeleton crews, and the researchers had retreated to their quarters or the recreational facilities. Marcus remained exactly where he had been for 7 months, 14 days, and 16 hours, watching the stars while slowly past his viewport. He had memorized the patterns of Jupiter's moons, the timing of the station's orbital rotation, the way the ice crystals formed on the outer surface of his window when the heating systems cycled down for maintenance. These small details had become the markers of his existence, the only changes in his static world. But tonight felt different somehow. There was an electric tension in the air that Marcus couldn't quite identify. The station's usual background hum seemed subtly altered, as if some system was operating at a frequency he'd never heard before. His trained ear for signal analysis picked up variations in the electromagnetic field that surrounded the medical bay. In the distance, he could hear increased activity in the communications center. Voices carried through the ventilation system, speaking in the rapid, urgent tones that indicated something significant was happening. Marcus strained to catch fragments of conversation, his enhanced hearing focusing on every available sound. Signal strength increasing, definitely artificial origin. Pattern suggests intelligence. The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind. The transmissions Dr. Vasquez had mentioned weren't just unusual background radiation. They were communications from something or someone in the outer system. First contact protocols would be activating throughout the station. This was the moment humanity had been preparing for since the establishment of the Deep Space Monitoring Network. And Marcus, trapped in his paralyzed body, could only listen from the sidelines as history unfolded around him. Hours passed as the activity level throughout the station remained elevated. Marcus caught glimpses of personnel moving quickly through the corridors outside his room, their faces bearing expressions of excitement and apprehension. Emergency lighting activated in several sections, indicating that non-essential systems were being powered down to redirect energy to critical operations. The communications array would be operating at maximum capacity now, every receiver trained on the source of the mysterious signals. Data analysis teams would be working in shifts, applying every decryption algorithm and pattern recognition protocol in their databases. Marcus knew the procedures by heart. He had helped write many of them during his years as a communications specialist. As dawn approached on the station's artificial schedule, Marcus noticed something that made his mental training and observation skills suddenly seem crucial. The electromagnetic variations he'd been detecting all night weren't random fluctuations in the station systems. They followed a pattern, a rhythm that suggested intentional modulation. Someone or something was scanning the station, and whatever was doing the scanning had just found Marcus's room. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The frequency variations matched the neural monitoring equipment connected to his pod. Something was reading the electromagnetic signature of his brain activity, analyzing the patterns of his consciousness. But that should have been impossible. The medical equipment used heavily shielded circuits to prevent interference. Nothing should have been able to detect those signals from outside the room, let alone from outside the station, unless whatever was scanning them possessed technology far beyond human capabilities. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with a medical-based temperature regulation. If his analysis was correct, and his years of experience told him it was, then humanity's first contact with alien intelligence wasn't happening in the communication center with carefully planned protocols and diplomatic procedures. It was happening right here in the medical bay with a paralyzed man who couldn't even blink to acknowledge the presence examining his mind. The scanning sensation intensified, becoming almost tangible in its focus. Marcus felt as though invisible fingers were probing the edges of his consciousness, testing the boundaries of his awareness. It wasn't painful, but it was deeply unsettling to know that something was inside his head without his permission. Then, impossibly, he heard a voice that wasn't transmitted through his ears, but spoke directly into his mind. Marcus Kane, Communications Specialist, Terra Station 7. We have found you. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It possessed qualities that human vocal cords couldn't produce, harmonics that suggested an alien physiology. But somehow, impossibly, it spoke perfect English with complete understanding of human language and concepts. Marcus tried to respond, to think back at whatever was communicating with him, but he wasn't sure if his mental voice could be heard the way the aliens could. He focused his thoughts as clearly as possible. Who are you? What do you want? We are the Keth Mori. We have traveled far to reach your species. You were selected because your mind calls out louder than the others. Your silence has made you visible to us in ways your companions cannot understand. The irony was staggering. His paralysis, the very condition that had cut him off from human contact, had somehow made him the perfect receiver for alien communication. The enforced stillness of his body had quieted the electromagnetic noise that typically surrounded human consciousness, creating a clear channel for telepathic contact. Why me specifically? There are thousands of people on this station. Your mind has been purified by suffering. Marcus Kane. The barriers that prevent most humans from true communication have been stripped away. You think in patterns we can follow, speak in silences we can hear. You're what your people would call a natural receiver. Marcus felt a mixture of wonder and terror. First contact with an alien species, and he was humanity's representative. A man who couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even prove to his own species that this conversation was taking place. The responsibility was overwhelming. What do you want from humanity? We bring warning, Marcus Kane. There are others coming, others who do not share our peaceful intentions. Your species must prepare, must unite, must learn to fight as one. But first, you must learn to speak with us properly. I can't speak. I can barely think coherently most of the time. You can do more than you know. The condition that binds your body has freed your mind. We can teach you to use abilities your species possesses but has forgotten. But time is short, and there is much you must understand. The communication channel suddenly felt stronger, more stable. Marcus realized that whatever the Keth Mori were doing, they were establishing a permanent telepathic link. He could feel new pathways opening in his mind, dormant areas of his brain suddenly flooding with activity. This will change you, Marcus Kane. You will become a bridge between our peoples. But know this. The path we offer leads away from the human you once were. Do you consent to this transformation? Marcus thought of his paralyzed body, his isolation, his complete helplessness. Then, he thought of humanity facing an unknown threat without warning, without preparation. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. I consent. Then, let us begin your true awakening, Marcus Kane. Your people call you the Reaper, though they do not yet understand why. Soon, that name will carry meaning across the stars. As the alien presence flooded his consciousness, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 7 months, 14 days, and 16 hours. For the first time since his paralysis began, Marcus Kane felt truly alive. The transformation began immediately, flooding Marcus's consciousness with sensations he had never imagined possible. The Kethmori presence in his mind felt like warm electricity, rewiring neural pathways that had been dormant since birth. His perception expanded beyond the confines of his physical body, reaching out into the station's electromagnetic field like invisible tendrils of awareness. Through this new sense, Marcus could feel the life signatures of every person aboard Terra Station 7. Dr. Vasquez was in her quarters, her mind troubled by dreams of failed medical procedures. Director Chun paced his office, stress radiating from his thoughts as he coordinated the response to the alien transmissions. 3,000 souls aboard the station, each one now visible to Marcus as distinct patterns of consciousness. Your species possesses latent telepathic abilities, the Kethmori voice explained as the changes continued. Most humans never develop these gifts because your society does not recognize their existence. But trauma, isolation, and certain medical conditions can sometimes trigger their emergence. Your paralysis has created the perfect conditions for awakening. Marcus felt his awareness stretching further beyond the station and into the void of space. He could sense the Kethmori ship now, a massive vessel hidden in the shadow of Jupiter's radiation belt. It was unlike any human technology he had ever encountered, its hull composed of materials that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The crew numbered in the hundreds, their alien minds creating harmonious patterns that hummed with shared purpose. We are explorers and guardians, the voice continued. For millennia, we have traveled between star systems, cataloging developing civilizations, and watching for signs of the devourers. Your species has reached the threshold where such protection becomes necessary. Devourers? Marcus formed the mental question with growing dread. Images flooded his consciousness, memories from the collective experience of the Kethmori. He saw worlds stripped bare of all organic matter, entire civilizations reduced to empty husks in a matter of days. The Devourers were an ancient enemy, a species that consumed not just resources but consciousness itself, leaving behind sterile planets orbiting dead suns. They moved between galaxies, following the electromagnetic signatures that young civilizations produce when they begin using advanced technology. Your species' expansion into space has created a beacon that will draw them here within 5 of your years. The timeline hit Marcus like a physical blow. 5 years to prepare for an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. 5 years to unite a species that couldn't even stop fighting among themselves long enough to address climate change. The task seemed impossible. This is why we need you, Marcus Kane. Your unique position allows you to serve as a communication bridge. But more than that, you can help your people develop the abilities they will need to survive. The Devourers feed on individual consciousness, but they cannot easily consume minds that are linked in a telepathic network. Marcus felt the implications settle into his enhanced awareness. Humanity's salvation wouldn't come from weapons or technology alone. It would require a fundamental evolution in human consciousness, the development of telepathic abilities that could create a collective defense against an enemy that attacked the mind itself. But how can I help anyone? I'm trapped in this body, unable to communicate with my own species. That limitation is about to change. The alien presence in his mind intensified, and Marcus felt his awareness being drawn deeper into the station systems. Through the electromagnetic field, he could sense the neural implants that connected him to his life support equipment. The Kethmori were showing him how to interface with these systems directly, using his newly awakened telepathic abilities to bridge the gap between mind and machine. Slowly, carefully, Marcus reached out with his consciousness and touched the control systems of his medical pod. For the first time in over 7 months, he felt connected to something outside his paralyzed body. The sensation was intoxicating after so long in isolation. The pod's diagnostic systems registered his neural activity, interpreting his telepathic commands as intentional input. Warning lights began flashing as the medical equipment detected unprecedented brain wave patterns. Within minutes, alarms would sound, and Dr. Vasquez would come running to investigate the anomalous readings. Use this time wisely, the Kethmori advised. Your people must be prepared gradually. Revealing too much too quickly will cause panic and disbelief. Begin with those closest to you, those who have shown faith in your continued consciousness. Marcus focused his attention on the room's communication system, using his telepathic interface to access the internal station network. His consciousness flowed through the digital pathways like water, finding its course, navigating security protocols with an intuitive understanding that surprised him. This wasn't just telepathy. The Kethmori had given him a form of technopathy, the ability to communicate directly with electronic systems. He found Dr. Vasquez's personal communicator and sent a simple message. Elena, come to my room immediately. Something extraordinary is happening. Marcus, the response was immediate. Through the station sensor network, Marcus could track her running through the corridors, her mind racing with confusion and hope. She burst into his medical bay less than 3 minutes later, her tablet clutched in her trembling hands. Marcus? Did you somehow? How is this possible? She stared at her communicator, then at his motionless form in the medical pod. The message came from your room's terminal, but your neural activity shows no motor function. Marcus concentrated on the room's speakers, channeling his consciousness through the audio systems. His first attempt produced only static, but the second try yielded recognizable words, though they sounded electronic and distorted. Elena, can you hear me? Dr. Vasquez nearly dropped her tablet. She moved closer to the medical pod, her eyes wide with disbelief and scientific curiosity. Your lips aren't moving. Your throat muscles show no activity. How are you speaking? Not speaking, thinking into the systems. Elena, I need you to listen carefully. Something incredible has happened, but you must promise to keep this quiet until I can explain everything. The next hour was the longest conversation Marcus had experienced since his paralysis began. He explained everything to Dr. Vasquez, from the alien contact to his expanding telepathic abilities. She listened with the trained skepticism of a scientist, but also with the open mind of someone who had spent months hoping for exactly this kind of breakthrough. Show me, she said finally. If you can really interface with our systems telepathically, prove it. Marcus reached out with his consciousness and accessed her personal tablet, scrolling through her research files and displaying her daughter's picture on the screen. Then he connected to the room's environmental controls, adjusting the temperature and lighting in patterns that spelled out her daughter's name. Dr. Vasquez sat down heavily, her scientific worldview adjusting to accommodate impossible realities. We need to run tests, document everything, understand how this is happening. We will, but carefully. Elena, humanity is in danger. The aliens who contacted me, the Kethmori, they're here to warn us about something called the Devourers. We have 5 years to prepare for an enemy that destroys civilizations by consuming consciousness itself. The color drained from Dr. Vasquez's face. You're serious about this. More serious than I've ever been about anything. The Kethmori believe that humans have latent telepathic abilities that could be developed into a defense against this threat. But we need to start building that defense now, and we need to do it quietly until we understand more about what we're facing. Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly, her scientific training helping her process the information despite its extraordinary nature. What do you need from me? Access to the station's research databases and help selecting other candidates who might be able to develop these abilities. The Kethmori suggested that people who have experienced trauma or isolation might be more susceptible to telepathic awakening. Over the following days, Dr. Vasquez helped Marcus establish a covert research program within the station's existing medical studies. They identified 17 individuals whose psychological profiles suggested potential for telepathic development. Accident survivors dealing with chronic pain, researchers who had spent extended periods in isolation, individuals with certain neurological conditions that might have created the same kind of neural pathway changes that Marcus had experienced. Marcus learned to refine his technopathic abilities, interfacing with multiple systems simultaneously while maintaining his telepathic connection with the Kethmori. The aliens provided guidance and instruction, teaching him techniques for safely awakening dormant abilities in other humans without causing psychological damage. The first successful contact was with Sarah Chun, an engineer who had survived a shuttle accident that left her with chronic migraines and partial hearing loss. Marcus reached out to her through the station's internal network, sending carefully crafted messages that appeared to come from routine system diagnostics. When she finally responded telepathically, the connection was weak but unmistakable. "Who is this? How are you in my head? My name is Marcus Kane. I know this is frightening, but you're not going crazy. You have abilities that most humans don't understand, abilities that could help save our species." Sarah's initial terror gave way to curiosity as Marcus explained the situation. Within a week, she had developed enough control over her telepathic gifts to communicate clearly across the station. She became Marcus's first recruit in what they privately called the Silent Network. The second contact was Dr. James Wright, a xenobiologist whose research into extremophile organisms had left him partially isolated from normal human social interaction. His logical mind helped him accept the reality of telepathic communication more easily than Sarah had, and his scientific background made him valuable in documenting and understanding the awakening process. One by one, Marcus and Dr. Vasquez quietly identified and awakened individuals throughout the station. Each new member of the Silent Network strengthened the overall telepathic field, making subsequent awakenings easier and more stable. They developed protocols for safe mental linking, established communication channels that couldn't be detected by conventional monitoring equipment, and began planning for the eventual expansion of their network beyond Terra Station 7. But as their capabilities grew, so did the challenges they faced. The station's artificial intelligence systems began detecting anomalous patterns in the network traffic, and Director Chin started asking questions about the unusual collaboration between previously unconnected research departments. More troubling still, Marcus's enhanced awareness had begun picking up disturbing signals from the outer system. The Devourers were closer than the Kethmori had originally estimated. The electromagnetic signatures suggested an advanced scout force, probing the edges of human space and gathering intelligence about their capabilities. They move faster when they detect resistance, the Kethmori explained during one of their nightly telepathic conferences. Your development of the Silent Network has accelerated their timeline. We estimate 18 months before the main force arrives. The news hit Marcus like a physical blow. 18 months to transform enough of humanity to create an effective defense. 18 months to convince world governments to take the threat seriously. 18 months to prepare for a war unlike any in human history. We need to expand beyond this station, Marcus told Dr. Vasquez and the other core members of the Silent Network. 17 people isn't enough. We need thousands, millions if possible. Dr. Vasquez looked troubled. Moving too fast risks exposure. If the governments find out about this before we're ready to demonstrate the threat, they might shut us down entirely. And if we move too slowly, there won't be any governments left to worry about, Sarah Chun pointed out through their telepathic link. Marcus made the decision that would change everything. We take the risk. Tomorrow, we contact Earth. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. Using the station's deep space communication array, they would establish telepathic contact with sensitive individuals in major population centers across Earth and the other colonies. The goal was to create multiple nodes of the Silent Network simultaneously, making it impossible for any single government or organization to shut down their operations. But as Marcus prepared for the most important communication of his life, his enhanced awareness detected something that made his blood run cold. That the Devourer Scout Force had just entered the outer edges of the solar system, and they were heading straight for Jupiter. Humanity's time had just run out. The Devourer Scout ships appeared on Terra Station 7, sensors like ghosts materializing from a void. 3 vessels, each roughly the size of a small moon, emerged from the darkness beyond Pluto's orbit with technology that bent space around them in ways human physics couldn't explain. The station's long-range detection systems registered them as massive gravitational anomalies before visual confirmation revealed their true horror. Marcus felt them before the sensors did. Through his expanded consciousness, the Devourer presence registered as a cold emptiness that seemed to drain warmth from the universe itself. They weren't just alien. They were antithetical to life, consciousness eaters that left psychic void in their wake. Even at this distance, their approach sent waves of dread through the silent network. Emergency protocols are activating throughout the system, Dr. Vasquez reported, her face pale as she monitored the station's communication feeds. Every military installation from Mercury to the Kuiper Belt is going to full alert. First contact protocols are being implemented, but the governments have no idea what they're actually facing. Marcus reached out through the station's communication array, his consciousness flowing through the quantum entanglement channels that connected Terra Station 7 to Earth. The telepathic network he had spent weeks carefully constructing was about to face its first real test, but not in the way he had planned. Sarah, James, everyone in the network, we need to accelerate everything. The Devourers are here, and humanity doesn't understand what it's facing. The response came back immediately through their telepathic link. 17 minds speaking as one, their combined consciousness creating patterns that rippled through the electromagnetic spectrum. For the first time since his paralysis began, Marcus felt truly connected to something larger than himself. "We're ready, Marcus." Sarah Chin's mental voice carried the determination of someone who had already lost everything once and refused to lose again. "The Earth contacts you've been preparing, we can reach them simultaneously if we link our abilities." Dr. Wright's scientific mind added tactical analysis to their shared consciousness. The governments will try to handle this through conventional military responses. We need to demonstrate that telepathic defense is not just possible, but necessary. Show them what the Devourers actually do to unprotected minds. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling over him like a lead blanket. In the span of a few hours, he had gone from being a medical curiosity to being humanity's best hope for survival. The irony would have been laughable if the stakes weren't so catastrophic. "Keth Mori, are you still monitoring our communications?" The alien presence in his mind responded immediately, but with an urgency that hadn't been there before. "We are here, Marcus Kane, but we must inform you that our situation has changed. The Devourer Advanced Scouts are not just reconnaissance vessels. They are harvester ships designed to collect consciousness samples from target civilizations. They will begin feeding immediately upon arrival." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Feeding? How many people? Their initial harvest typically claims 10 to 15% of a population. They consume the strongest minds first, those most capable of resistance. Your leaders, your scientists, your military commanders, anyone whose consciousness burns brightly enough to attract their attention. Dr. Vasquez went white. The governments don't know. They're going to send their best people to make first contact, and those people are going to be consumed. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. The Devourers didn't just randomly attack civilizations. They followed a specific strategy designed to decapitate leadership and eliminate resistance before the main invasion force arrived. Humanity was walking directly into a trap. We have to warn them, but they won't listen to 17 people claiming to have telepathic abilities. We need proof, and we need it now. The solution came to him with crystalline clarity. "Keth Mori, can you provide us with detailed technical specifications for the Devourer ships? Something that our instruments couldn't possibly detect, but that we could predict through our telepathic connection. We can share what we know, but understand that this will expose your network to Devourer attention. Once you demonstrate knowledge of their capabilities, they will begin hunting you specifically." Marcus made the calculation instantly. "If we don't take that risk, there won't be anyone left to hunt." "Do it. The transfer of information was unlike anything Marcus had experienced, even after weeks of alien contact. The Kethmori downloaded millennia of accumulated knowledge about Devourer technology directly into his consciousness. Ship configurations, weapon systems, feeding mechanisms, tactical patterns, psychological profiles of their command structures. The data flow was so intense that for a moment, Marcus felt his awareness fragmenting under the pressure. But the silent network held him together. 17 minds sharing the load, processing the information collectively, and integrating it into human understanding. When the transfer completed, Marcus possessed more detailed intelligence about the approaching enemy than any human military commander had access to. Dr. Vasquez, I need you to contact Director Chun immediately. Tell him that our medical research team has discovered something critical about the alien vessels, something that could only have come from direct neural interface analysis. While Dr. Vasquez made the call, Marcus reached out through the quantum communication channels toward Earth. His consciousness touched the minds he had been identifying over the past weeks. Dr. Amanda Foster at the CDC, who had been experiencing prophetic dreams since her near-death experience. Colonel Michael Barnes at Strategic Command, whose combat injuries had left him with unusual sensory abilities. Dr. Lin Zhou at the Beijing Institute of Technology, whose research into quantum consciousness had made her naturally receptive to telepathic contact. The connections formed one by one, fragile threads of consciousness spanning millions of kilometers. Each new link strengthened the network exponentially, creating resonance patterns that amplified telepathic abilities in every connected mind. This is Marcus Kane, communications specialist at Terra Station 7. I know this sounds impossible, but I'm communicating with you telepathically through abilities that human beings naturally possess but rarely develop. The alien ships approaching our system are not explorers or potential allies. They are consciousness predators, and humanity needs to prepare for a form of warfare that our military training never anticipated. The responses came back as a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and growing alarm as the Earth-based contacts felt the truth of the telepathic connection for themselves. Dr. Foster was the first to accept the reality of the situation, her medical training helping her process the neurological implications of what she was experiencing. How many people can develop these abilities? How quickly can we expand the network? Potentially millions, but we need time, and we need official support. The governments have to be convinced that this isn't some kind of elaborate hoax or psychological experiment. Director Chun arrived in Marcus's medical bay within 10 minutes of Dr. Vasquez's call, bringing with him the station's chief of security and 2 military liaison officers. Marcus could sense their skepticism and professional wariness through the telepathic network, but he could also feel their growing desperation as reports came in from throughout the solar system. Dr. Vasquez says you have information about the alien vessels that our sensors can't detect. Director Chin said without preamble. I need to know how that's possible and what you've discovered. Marcus interfaced with the room's holographic display system, using his technopathic abilities to project detailed schematics of the Devourer's ships. The level of detail was extraordinary. Internal structures, power distribution networks, the biomechanical chambers where consciousness harvesting took place. Information that human science wouldn't be able to gather for years, even with direct access to the vessels. The ships you're seeing on long-range sensors are only the beginning, Marcus explained through the room speakers. Each one carries approximately 50,000 smaller harvesting units that will deploy once they reach optimal feeding range. These units don't register on conventional sensors because they exist partially outside normal space-time. Director Chin studied the projections, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. How could you possibly know this? Our most advanced scanning equipment can barely detect the ships themselves, let alone analyze their internal structure. Because I've been in telepathic contact with the Kethmori, an alien species that has been fighting the Devourers for millennia. They came here to warn us and to help us develop the only defense that has ever proven effective against consciousness-eating predators. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus could feel the conflict in Director Chen's mind. The logical impossibility of telepathic communication warring against the undeniable accuracy of the intelligence being provided. Colonel Barnes, one of the military liaisons, stepped forward. "Sir, we're receiving confirmation of the ship details from our deep space monitoring stations. The gravitational analysis matches these projections exactly. Whoever provided this information has access to scanning technology decades ahead of anything we possess." That was the moment Director Chun made his decision. "What do you need?" The next 6 hours transformed Terra Station 7 from a research facility into humanity's first telepathic warfare training center. Marcus worked with Dr. Vasquez to identify every person on the station who showed potential for telepathic development, while the silent network established secure communication links with military commands throughout the solar system. The process of awakening telepathic abilities was exhausting and dangerous. 3 candidates suffered severe neurological damage when their minds couldn't handle the activation process. But for every failure, 2 others successfully joined the network, adding their consciousness to humanity's growing collective defense. By the time the Devourer ships reached the orbit of Saturn, the silent network had expanded to over 300 active members spread across 12 different locations. The network's collective awareness had grown strong enough to monitor the approaching enemy in real time, tracking their movements and analyzing their tactical preparations. What they discovered was terrifying. The Devourers weren't just planning to harvest consciousness. They were conducting a systematic analysis of human civilization, identifying key population centers and critical infrastructure targets. The attack would be surgical, designed to cripple humanity's ability to resist while preserving enough of the population for extended feeding. The main harvest will begin in 72 hours. The Kethmori informed Marcus during their evening telepathic conference. The scout ships will deploy harvesting units to major population centers on Earth and the colonial worlds. Current projections suggest they will consume approximately 400 million human minds in the first wave. 400 million people. The number was so large that Marcus's consciousness recoiled from it. Nearly half of humanity's total population, gone in a matter of hours. The survivors would be left in a state of psychological trauma that would make organized resistance nearly impossible. "We have to stop this," Marcus transmitted to the entire silent network. "Every mind we can protect, every person we can connect to the network, potentially saves hundreds or thousands of others." But even as the network grew, Marcus could feel the Devourer's attention focusing on them. The enemy had detected the electromagnetic signatures that telepathic communication produced, and they were beginning to adapt their tactics accordingly. The harvesting units were being redeployed to target areas with high concentrations of network activity. "They're hunting us specifically now," Sarah Chun reported from her position in the engineering section. "The Devourer scanning patterns have changed. They're trying to isolate and eliminate network nodes before the main attack begins." Marcus felt a cold certainty settle over him. The enemy had detected humanity's only effective defense, and they were moving to eliminate it before it could mature. The silent network had bought humanity time and knowledge, but it had also painted a target on every telepathically active mind in the solar system. The real war was about to begin, and Marcus knew that his paralyzed body in a medical pod would soon become the command center for humanity's desperate fight for survival. The man they had started calling the Reaper was about to earn his name in ways no one had anticipated. The Devourer attack began at 3:47 Universal Coordinated Time with a systematic execution of Earth's leadership. Presidents, prime ministers, military commanders, and scientific advisors across the globe simply stopped responding to communications as harvesting units materialized in secured facilities and consumed their consciousness in milliseconds. The telepathic network felt each death as a sharp pain, the sudden severing of minds that had been on the verge of awakening. Marcus experienced the assault through the expanded awareness that his condition and alien enhancement had given him. From his medical pod on Terra Station 7, he watched in horror as pinpricks of darkness spread across Earth's electromagnetic field. Each point of darkness represented hundreds of thousands of consumed minds, leaving behind empty shells that would continue to breathe and function, but would never again think independent thoughts. Beijing has gone dark. Dr. Lin Zhou transmitted through the network, her mental voice tight with barely controlled panic. The entire government district was hit simultaneously. Military command is trying to respond, but they don't understand what they're fighting. Colonel Barnes' transmission came through from Strategic Command's deep bunker beneath Colorado. We're detecting massive energy discharges at government facilities worldwide, but our weapon systems can't lock onto the targets. They're phasing in and out of our reality somehow. Whatever tech they're using, it's beyond our current physics. Marcus reached out through the network, his consciousness touching each connected mind across the solar system. 347 active telepaths, their abilities varying wildly, but their determination absolute. It wasn't nearly enough to protect billions of people, but it was what they had to work with. Listen to me, all of you, Marcus transmitted to the entire network. The Devourers are following a predictable pattern. They're targeting leadership first to create chaos, then they'll move to population centers for mass harvesting. But their technology has limitations. The Keth Mori have taught me how to exploit those weaknesses. The alien allies had remained in constant telepathic contact throughout the crisis, providing tactical intelligence and guidance. Their massive ship lurked in Jupiter's radiation belt, hidden from Devourer detection by exotic shielding technology. But they couldn't intervene directly without triggering a larger conflict that would draw the main Devourer fleet to Earth decades ahead of schedule. The harvesting units exist partially in what your science would call subspace, the lead Keth Mori consciousness explained. They can only maintain material cohesion for limited periods when interacting with normal matter. Strong electromagnetic fields can disrupt their phase variance and force them back into subspace. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his enhanced awareness. The network itself can be weaponized. If we synchronize our telepathic transmissions, we can create electromagnetic pulses that will disrupt their harvesting technology. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her medical monitoring station, where she had been tracking Marcus's neural activity throughout the crisis. Your brain patterns are off the charts. Marcus, the stress of maintaining network connections across this distance is pushing your nervous system beyond safe limits. Safe limits stopped being relevant about 6 hours ago, Marcus replied through the room's speakers. Elena, I need you to prepare maximum stimulant doses. Whatever happens in the next few hours, I can't afford to lose consciousness. The next phase of the Devourer attack targeted major population centers: Hong Kong, London, New York, Sao Paulo, Mumbai. In each city, thousands of harvesting units materialized simultaneously in areas of high population density. Shopping centers, office buildings, transportation hubs. The units moved through crowds like sharks through schools of fish, consuming minds, and leaving behind vacant human shells. But this time, the silent network was ready. Marcus coordinated the response from his medical pod, his consciousness serving as a command center for telepathic counterattacks across the globe. Network members in each targeted city focused their abilities into synchronized transmissions, creating electromagnetic storms that disrupted the harvesting unit's phase coherence. London Network. Target the units in Piccadilly Circus. Frequency 7.83 Hz. Maximum amplitude. Tokyo Network. Focus on Shibuya Station. Same frequency. Coordinate your timing with London. The results were immediate and dramatic. Harvesting units that had been invisible to conventional sensors suddenly became visible as they were forced back into normal space-time. More importantly, they became vulnerable to conventional weapons fire. Military units that had been helplessly watching the slaughter suddenly found targets they could actually engage. It's working. Colonel Barnes transmitted from Strategic Command. Enemy units are materializing and taking damage from small arms fire. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Each synchronized telepathic pulse required enormous energy from the network members. Marcus felt minds burning out across the globe as people pushed their newly awakened abilities beyond safe limits. Dr. Amanda Foster, the CDC, suffered a massive stroke while coordinating the Atlanta defense. 3 members of the Tokyo network went into cardiac arrest from the neural strain. "We're losing people," Marcus Sarachan reported from her position in Terra Station 7's engineering section. The human nervous system wasn't designed for this kind of sustained telepathic warfare. Marcus felt each lost network member as a personal failure, but he also knew that backing down meant the extinction of human consciousness. "We adapt or we die." Keth Mori, is there any way to reduce the strain on our people? "There is one possibility," the alien consciousness replied, "but it requires a sacrifice that may be unacceptable to your kind. One mind could serve as a focal point for the entire network, channeling all telepathic energy through a single consciousness. This would reduce the strain on individual members, but would almost certainly destroy the focal mind within hours." The solution was obvious, and Marcus accepted it without hesitation. "I'll be the focal point. My nervous system is already damaged, and my body is already confined to life support. I have the least to lose." "Marcus, no," Dr. Vasquez protested from her monitoring station. "Your neural activity is already beyond safe parameters. Taking on the full network load will kill you. And not taking it on will kill everyone else," Marcus replied calmly. "Besides, I think I was always meant for this role. The Reaper, right?" Maybe that name was more prophetic than anyone realized. The conversion process began immediately. The Keth Mori guided Marcus through the mental exercises needed to transform his consciousness into a telepathic relay station. His awareness expanded exponentially as network members across the solar system routed their abilities through his mind. The sensation was indescribable. Hundreds of human consciousnesses flowing through his neurons like electricity through superconducting cables. His body began failing almost immediately. Heart rate spiked to dangerous levels. Brain temperature rose beyond normal human limits, and the life support system struggled to maintain basic biological functions. But his mind had never been clearer. Through the network, Marcus could see the entire battle unfolding across human space in real time. The Devourers adapted quickly to humanity's telepathic defense. Unable to complete their planned mass harvesting, they began deploying larger units specifically designed to hunt network members. These hunter-killers could track telepathic transmissions directly, materializing near active network nodes and consuming every connected mind in the vicinity. "They're targeting the network directly now," Dr. Wright reported from his laboratory. "We're losing entire node clusters." The Manila network just went completely silent. Marcus felt the deaths ripple through his consciousness like physical wounds. 43 minds in Manila snuffed out in seconds. The Bangkok network reported hunter-killers closing on their position. The survivors in London were being systematically hunted through the city's underground tunnel system. "Everyone needs to go silent except for emergency transmissions," Marcus commanded through the network. "I'll maintain the electromagnetic disruption field solo. The rest of you find somewhere to hide and wait for an opportunity to strike back." What followed was the longest 6 hours of Marcus's life. Alone in his medical pod, his paralyzed body sustained by machines while his mind bore the full weight of humanity's telepathic defense, he fought a war that spanned continents. Every few minutes, Devourer harvesting units would attempt to resume their feeding, and Marcus would respond with focused electromagnetic pulses that disrupted their technology. The strain was incredible. Marcus could feel his neural pathways burning out one by one, critical brain functions shutting down as he pushed his enhanced abilities beyond their limits. Dr. Vasquez monitored his condition with growing alarm, administering stimulants and neural stabilizers to keep him conscious, but they both knew he was dying. "Neural cascade failure in sectors 7 through 12, she reported grimly. "Marcus, you need to let someone else take part of the load." Your brain is literally cooking itself from the inside. Not yet, Marcus whispered through failing speakers. The main attack is coming. I can feel it building. He was right. Through his expanded awareness, Marcus sensed the 3 Devourer scout ships moving into final attack position. They had abandoned their original harvesting strategy in favor of a direct assault on Earth's major population centers. The plan was simple and brutal: consume enough human consciousness to leave the species incapable of organized resistance. The attack began with the deployment of harvesting swarms over every major city on Earth simultaneously. Millions of units, each one capable of consuming dozens of minds per minute. It was a feeding frenzy designed to strip away human consciousness like a locust swarm devouring a wheat field. Marcus reached deeper into his failing nervous system than he had ever gone before, drawing on reserves of mental energy he didn't know he possessed. His consciousness expanded to encompass the entire electromagnetic field surrounding Earth, turning his awareness into a planetary defense grid. The electromagnetic storm he generated was visible from space, aurora-like patterns dancing across Earth's magnetosphere as telepathic energy interacted with the planet's natural field. Every Devourer harvesting unit within the field was simultaneously forced back into subspace, their technology overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the psychic disruption. For 37 minutes, Marcus single-handedly held off an attack force designed to consume billions of minds. His body died twice during that time, only to be revived by Dr. Vasquez and the automated medical systems that kept his ruined nervous system functioning. When the Devourer scout ships finally withdrew beyond the orbit of Mars, defeated and forced to await reinforcements, Marcus Kane had saved human civilization. But the victory had cost him everything. His enhanced consciousness was fragmenting, pieces of his identity scattering like leaves in a hurricane. "Marcus, can you hear me?" Dr. Vasquez's voice seemed to come from very far away. "I can hear you," he replied, though he wasn't sure if the words came through the speakers or directly from his dying mind. "How many did we save?" Early estimates suggest over 90% of the population survived with full consciousness intact. "Marcus, you did it. You actually did it." Marcus felt a strange peace settling over his fragmenting awareness. He had been the Reaper after all, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of harvesting death, he had reaped salvation from the jaws of extinction. "Elena," he whispered as his consciousness began to fade, "tell the network that this is just the beginning. The main Devourer fleet will come eventually, and humanity needs to be ready. They need to evolve, become something more than they are now. You're not dying, Marcus. We can keep you stable, find a way to repair the neural damage." "No," Marcus replied with the last of his strength. "My part is finished. But make sure they remember, sometimes the greatest victories come from the most unlikely sources. Sometimes a man who can't even move can save the world." As consciousness faded from his ruined mind, Marcus Kane smiled with lips that could no longer feel sensation. He had found his purpose in the darkest hour of humanity's existence, and it had been worth every moment of suffering. The Reaper had claimed his greatest victory, the preservation of human consciousness itself. 3 years after the Battle of Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the Marcus Kane Memorial Telepathic Research Center, watching the latest group of candidates undergo consciousness enhancement procedures. The facility, built in Earth's L4 Lagrange point, had become humanity's primary training ground for what people now called silent warriors, individuals capable of telepathic combat against consciousness-consuming entities. The procedures had advanced significantly since those desperate first days when Marcus had burned out his nervous system, saving the species. Dr. Vasquez and her team had developed safe methods for awakening telepathic abilities, using a combination of alien technology provided by the Kethmori and advances in human neuroscience that Marcus's sacrifice had made possible. "Enhancement sequence complete for Candidate Group 77, reported Dr. James Wright, now the facility's chief of neurological development. All 12 subjects showing stable telepathic activity within acceptable parameters. No adverse reactions detected. Elena nodded, making notes on her tablet. They had come so far from those early, dangerous procedures that had claimed so many lives. The current success rate for telepathic enhancement was 93%, with virtually no risk of permanent neurological damage. Marcus would have been amazed to see how his sacrifice had catalyzed humanity's evolution. Dr. Vasquez, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Kethmori ship, announced Lieutenant Sarah Chun, now serving as the facility's communications officer. Her own telepathic abilities had grown exponentially in the years since the initial contact, making her one of the most powerful human telepaths in existence. Elena walked to the main communication chamber, where the quantum entanglement transmitters maintained constant contact with their alien allies. The Kethmori had remained in the solar system since the Devourer attack, helping humanity prepare for the inevitable return of the main enemy fleet. The massive alien consciousness that had first spoken to Marcus materialized in Elena's mind with familiar warmth. Dr. Vasquez, we bring urgent news from the outer galaxy. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected the Devourer main fleet. They are approximately 18 months away from Earth, traveling in force that we estimate contains over 40,000 consciousness-harvesting vessels. Elena felt her blood run cold. 40,000 ships. The scout force that had attacked Earth 3 years ago had consisted of only 3 vessels, and they had nearly succeeded in destroying human civilization despite humanity's desperate telepathic defense. A force this large would be capable of stripping consciousness from entire star systems. How does this compare to previous Devourer invasions you've encountered? Elena asked through the telepathic link. This is the largest force they have ever assembled. Your species' successful resistance to their initial harvest has marked you as a significant threat to their expansion. They're coming not just to feed, but to completely eliminate human consciousness from the galaxy. Elena activated the facility's emergency communication protocols, sending alert signals to every silent network node across human space. Within minutes, telepathic voices were checking in from Mars, the asteroid belt, the outer colonies, and deep space installations. The network that had begun with 17 people on Terra Station 7 now encompassed over 50,000 trained telepaths spread across the solar system. Priority alert to all network members. Elena transmitted through her enhanced consciousness. Devourer main fleet detected. 18 months to arrival. Estimated force, strength 40,000 vessels. Begin implementation of Reaper Protocol immediately. The Reaper Protocol was humanity's ultimate defensive strategy, developed in the years following Marcus's sacrifice. Named in honor of the man who had first demonstrated that human consciousness could be weaponized against the Devourers, the protocol called for the complete telepathic integration of human civilization. Instead of fighting the enemy with a relatively small number of enhanced telepaths, humanity would awaken the latent psychic abilities that existed in every human mind. The process was dangerous and not entirely reversible, but it would create a species-wide consciousness network capable of generating electromagnetic disruption fields orders of magnitude more powerful than anything Marcus had achieved. Dr. Wright joined Elena in the communication chamber, his expression grim. The preliminary calculations are sobering, Elena. Even with full species telepathic integration, our defensive capabilities will be stretched to their absolute limits against a force this size. We're looking at potential casualties in the hundreds of millions, possibly billions. Then, we need to evolve beyond our current limitations, Elena replied firmly. Marcus showed us that human consciousness is capable of far more than we ever imagined. If 40,000 ships are coming, then we need to become something that 40,000 ships can't defeat. Over the following months, the Reaper Protocol transformed human civilization in ways that would have been unimaginable before the Devourer threat. Telepathic enhancement centers were established on every inhabited world and major space station. Children began receiving consciousness training alongside traditional education. The entire species slowly awakened to abilities that had been dormant since the dawn of human evolution. The process wasn't without its complications. Approximately 15% of the population proved unable to handle telepathic enhancement, suffering various degrees of psychological trauma that required specialized treatment. Religious groups argued that consciousness modification was an affront to divine creation. Political tensions arose as governments struggled to maintain authority over populations that could communicate directly mind to mind. But necessity drove progress. As reports arrived of entire civilizations and distant star systems going silent, consumed by the advancing devourer fleet, humanity's resolve hardened. They would evolve, or they would perish. There was no middle ground. Elena found herself thinking often of Marcus during those months of preparation. His medical pod had been preserved as a memorial in the research center, a reminder of the price that had been paid for human survival. Sometimes she would sit beside it and imagine she could still hear his voice offering guidance and encouragement. "You started something incredible. Marcus," she would whisper to the empty pod. "I hope what we're becoming would make you proud." The answer came one evening as Elena worked late in the facility's main laboratory. She had been analyzing the latest neural enhancement procedures when she felt a familiar presence touch the edges of her consciousness. It was impossible, of course. Marcus had died 3 years ago, his neural patterns completely destroyed by the strain of maintaining the planetary defense network. But the touch was unmistakable. Gentle, wise, carrying the weight of sacrifice, and the warmth of someone who had found peace and purpose. "Elena," the presence whispered through her enhanced awareness. "You're not alone in this." She looked up from her work, her heart racing. "Marcus? How is this possible? You died. We monitored your neural activity until it went completely flat." "Death isn't what we thought it was," the presence replied. "Consciousness is more resilient than biological existence. The network we built, the connections between minds, they preserve something essential. I exist now as part of the collective human consciousness that my sacrifice helped create." Elena felt tears streaming down her face. "We've missed you. So many times we've needed your guidance, your insight into how the network functions. You've done better than I ever could have hoped. Humanity has become something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that chose evolution over extinction. But the real test is still coming." Over the following weeks, Elena began to understand that Marcus's consciousness hadn't simply survived, it had become something new. The traumatic neural cascade that had killed his body had somehow imprinted his awareness into the quantum structure of the silent network itself. He existed now as a distributed intelligence, his thoughts and memories spread across the minds of every enhanced human in the solar system. As the Devourer fleet approached the outer edges of human space, Marcus's guidance became invaluable. He could see patterns in the enemy formation that living observers missed, predict tactical movements based on his intimate knowledge of consciousness warfare, and coordinate defensive responses across impossible distances instantaneously. The Devourers have adapted since their first encounter with humanity, Marcus explained during one of their strategic planning sessions. They're deploying consciousness shielding technology designed to protect their forces from telepathic disruption. The electromagnetic pulse strategy that worked before will be much less effective. Elena studied the tactical projections with growing concern. "What do you recommend? We stop fighting them and start consuming them instead." The concept was radical and terrifying. Instead of using telepathic abilities defensively to disrupt Devourer technology, Marcus proposed that humanity go on the offensive. The enhanced human consciousness network could potentially reverse engineer the Devourer feeding process, consuming alien consciousness instead of being consumed by it. It would require perfect coordination among every enhanced human in the solar system, Marcus explained. Billions of minds acting as a single entity, focused on a single purpose. The risk is enormous. If the attempt fails, the psychic backlash could destroy human consciousness entirely. Dr. Wright was horrified by the proposal. You're talking about turning our entire species into consciousness predators. How does that make us any better than the devourers themselves? It doesn't, Marcus replied honestly, but it ensures our survival. Sometimes evolution requires choices that our previous moral frameworks can't accommodate. We can debate ethics after we've secured the future of human consciousness. The decision ultimately came down to a species-wide telepathic vote, the first direct democratic process to encompass every enhanced human mind simultaneously. The debate raged for 72 hours across the network, billions of consciousness arguing, questioning, and ultimately deciding the future of their species. The vote was closer than Elena had expected. 2.7 billion in favor of the consciousness predator strategy, 2.2 billion opposed. Humanity would become monsters to survive monstrous enemies, but they would do so with full awareness of what they were choosing to become. The final battle began when the Devourer fleet reached the orbit of Neptune. 40,000 ships, each one capable of consuming the consciousness of entire worlds, arrayed in attack formation designed to strip every trace of awareness from the solar system. Against them stood humanity, 4.5 billion enhanced minds linked in a collective consciousness network that spanned from Mercury to the Kuiper Belt. Marcus coordinated the defense from his distributed existence within the network, his awareness touching every human mind simultaneously. Elena felt his presence like a warm wind flowing through her consciousness, carrying with it the accumulated wisdom and determination of their species' greatest hour. Remember, Marcus transmitted to the entire network, we're not just fighting for survival. We're fighting for the right to define what humanity becomes. Show them what evolution looks like when a species refuses to surrender. The initial clash was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of technology fighting technology, it was consciousness against consciousness on a scale that warped space-time itself. The electromagnetic storms generated by the battle were visible from neighboring star systems, auroras of psychic energy painting the void in colors that had no names. Humanity struck first, 4.5 billion minds focusing their combined telepathic abilities into a focused beam of conscious energy that punched through the Devourer fleet's consciousness shielding like a spear through paper. The target was the fleet's command vessel, a massive consciousness harvester that coordinated the actions of the entire armada. The results were immediate and shocking. Instead of merely disrupting the command ship's systems, the human consciousness network began consuming the alien awareness that operated them. Devourer consciousness was fundamentally different from human awareness. Older, more structured, based on consumption rather than creation, but it was still consciousness, and consciousness could be absorbed. Elena felt the alien thoughts flowing into the network like dark wine, bitter and ancient, and filled with the accumulated memories of 1,000 consumed civilizations. The knowledge was overwhelming and terrifying, but it was also incredibly valuable. Every consumed devourer mind revealed tactical information, technological secrets, and strategic intelligence that could be used against the remaining fleet. We're winning, Dr. Wright transmitted in amazement. They can't adapt to this strategy because they've never encountered anything like it. No species has ever turned consciousness consumption back on the devourers. But the victory came at a cost that became clear only as the battle progressed. Each consumed alien consciousness left traces of itself within the human network, seeds of predatory instinct that began to influence human behavior. The rescuers were becoming the very monsters they had sought to defeat. Marcus felt the change beginning in the collective consciousness and made a decision that would define humanity's future. Instead of allowing the corruption to spread, he began pulling the consumed alien consciousness into his own distributed awareness, isolating the predatory instincts within the portion of the network that contained his own identity. "Marcus, what are you doing?" Elena demanded as she felt his presence beginning to darken with absorbed alien thoughts. "Protecting you," he replied as his consciousness became a repository for every consumed devourer awareness. Someone has to carry the burden of what we've become. Someone has to be the monster so the rest of humanity can remain human. The battle lasted 18 hours, ending when the last devourer vessel was consumed or driven from the solar system. Humanity had achieved total victory, but at a price that would echo through the generations. Marcus's consciousness, now carrying the absorbed awareness of 40,000 alien predators, had become something that could barely be called human. Elena found herself standing once again in the memorial chamber beside Marcus's empty medical pod, but now she could feel his transformed presence in the network like a dark star at the center of human consciousness. He was still there, still protecting them, but he had become something alien and terrible in the process. Was it worth it? She asked the presence that had once been her friend. Ask me in 1,000 years, came the reply, flavored with harmonics that belonged to no human throat. When humanity is spread across the galaxy and children are born who never knew the fear of consumption, ask me then if the price was worth paying. Elena nodded, understanding that some questions could only be answered by history itself. Marcus Kane, the man who had been paralyzed in silence, had become the Reaper in ways no one could have foreseen. He had saved humanity by becoming their darkness, carrying the burden of predatory consciousness so that a species could continue to evolve towards something better. In the years that followed, humanity would indeed spread across the galaxy, their enhanced consciousness abilities allowing them to communicate and cooperate on unprecedented scales. They would become explorers, creators, and guardians of other developing species. They would be remembered as the civilization that chose evolution over extinction, growth over consumption. But they would also remember Marcus Kane, the silent guardian who dwelt in the depths of their collective consciousness, forever watching for threats that might require a monster's response. The Reaper, who had harvested victory from the jaws of extinction and would stand sentinel until the end of human existence. In the depths of space, where consciousness and cosmos intertwined, Marcus Kane continued his eternal watch, ensuring that his species would never again face extinction in silence. He had found his voice at last, and it echoed across the stars with the promise that humanity would endure. The man confined in silence had spoken his name across the galaxy, humanity, and the galaxy had heard.